Charter Local Edition with your host, John MacDonald.
Hello, welcome. I'm visiting today with Representative Debra Lamm. Welcome, thank you very much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about your district. I know you're from Livingston. Tell us a little about your district.
I represent House District 60, which is Livingston and a newly expanded area from our redistricting process. So it includes some of North, West, and South Park County.
Excellent.
We have small businesses. We have a little bit of manufacturing.
Beautiful.
And a lot of ranching and agriculture.
Yeah, beautiful part of the state. So you served in the 2015 session on House Education Committee.
Yes.
And a lot of bills related to education came up, and I know you were a sponsor of several of those. So I wanted to visit with you a little bit about some of the priorities that you had and where things ended up for the 2015 session.
Well, as many people know, I have been a champion of education for many years. I come from a family of educators. I myself have a secondary education degree, although I'm not teaching. Education is very important to me and to our nation. And some of the bills that I brought were related to what I consider a national overreach, with a set of standards that are really much more than that. It is a way of teaching. It is delving into curriculum through the testing, because the testing will drive everything, and teachers will end up teaching to the test, even more so than they did with No Child Left Behind. So I'm very concerned about it. It's taking away local control that is so important to our communities. And along with that, the testing piece, which is this nationalized test that everyone will take regardless of special needs or an honors student. Everyone would be taking this same test. With that is this huge database of information on each student that is being put together and is being fed to the federal government. Some information is helpful, of course, but when you have a broad range of information that's being collected, like attitudes and beliefs and what happens in your home, you're really interfering with a parental role.
Okay.
And so that's why I brought the bills that I did.
And one of those specifically had to do with that issue of trying to limit the information that could be released. And essentially that bill talked about the fact that the information generated belonged to the student and the parents. Is that right?
Yes, and we see that nationally, even with ourselves, with the data collection at the national level through the NSA. But when it's a child from birth to their eventual death, then it becomes questionable. Why do they need all that information? Why are they collecting it? And it should be a child's right, and if they're under 18, of course, their parents' right to determine what information should be shared and for what purposes, and to understand what those purposes are. It attempted to ask the education groups to provide that background. One of the most important things that came out of the session is the admission, finally, that the education department is collecting first name, last name, personal information, along with other testing data, going to third-party for-profit companies. I happen to believe that that is an overreach and an extension into a family that shouldn't exist. And
the outcome of that bill, if I recall, wasn't favorable at the legislature this year, is that right?
Correct. We passed it out of House Education across the floor. It went over to the Senate, and it eventually died in the Senate side.
Do you have plans to try to reintroduce that next session, or a version of that bill that you think would have a more opportunity?
Absolutely. I think that this issue is front and center. I think you saw that with other data privacy bills. I will continue to work on it. I've talked with people across the country because virtually every state has some type of privacy bill for students as well as for adults.
Okay. And the other issue that you mentioned, I believe, is in reference to the Common Core. Talk a little bit about that and the concerns that you had about that, and what your bill was attempting to address.
The bill that I had was to say, wait a minute, we don't want these national standards. Let's look and see what makes the most sense for Montana. And that in the future, when new standards would come up before the board, that there would be ample opportunity for parents, for teachers in Montana to have a look at those and decide what would be most appropriate. And it was a process that we were looking for, and that there would be more transparency, because we did not have that with the Common Core standards.
Just kind of a broader question, your overall assessment from your position as someone who's been involved in education and someone who's in the legislature, what is your assessment of the 2015 session from your perspective?
In terms of education?
In terms of education and other issues in general as well.
Okay. I think we made some progress. We looked at the suicide prevention needs. We looked at transportation, school funding, and we will be moving forward with those during the interim as well. In the session overall, there were some very positive things and some things that I, of course, was very disappointed in. Namely, when we disrupt a process and bills don't have the proper hearings. We had a major Medicaid expansion bill that did not go to appropriations, and therefore there are a lot of unknowns that I think could be a real wake-up call down the road.
Sure, sure. A fairly typical session for you overall, or a little out of the ordinary?
There were some things that were a little out of the ordinary, of course, but you know, it is a process, and we have to just understand how to work within that.
Right.
You know, I think one of the very positive things that came out of it was in the mental health arena, and we had great bipartisan work on that, where we have bills now that the money can be directed from a local community and really looking at their needs, and not the state deciding what they should do with it.
Right. Well, I have been visiting today with Representative Debra Lamm from Livingston. It's been fantastic to get an opportunity to visit with you.
Thank
you very much for taking time for us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Charter Local Edition has been an exclusive presentation of Charter Communications, providing original programming.